Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. I think we all know that feeling of extreme tiredness that sometimes hits us when we are visiting a museum and we go through one display after the other and suddenly we just can't take any more in. It's too much. It's that well-known museum fatigue. It's been described a lot in lots of studies and surveys and so on. And it's actually quite an early phenomenon. It was described as early as 1916 by Benjamin Ives Stillman in an edition of Scientific Monthly. So it's a very early phenomenon. The way things are set up physically around us impacts how we understand and how we take things in. So it was very much described as a mental fatigue that was caused by physical surroundings. Now, in later studies, you find more detailed descriptions of the phenomenon. For example, how fatigue often become higher as we go through more and more displays. We also see the phenomenon in some outdoor settings like zoos, for example, or outdoor museum settings or heritage settings. Later on in the 80s, where we get more detailed studies and theories around learning perspectives, especially how we learn in museum settings and how this is linked with the cultural aspects of how we visit museum, our personal context, the social context in which we visit museums and so on. The phenomenon become more detailed described and better linked with other aspects of museum and heritage visits as well. But it is quite an early phenomenon and it was something that was definitely noticed very early on. So let's just have a look at some of the factors that can cause museum fatigue and what it actually is. Now, first of all, simply exhaustion. You are standing a lot, you are walking a lot, you are reading a lot, and for quite an extended period of time very often. So it's not actually that unusual that you simply start to feel exhausted after a certain period of time. We also see a phenomenon like object competition. Now, this is very much guided by the visitor's sense of value or interest here. That it is simply possible to have too much of a good thing. So when you have seen 1,000 different stone axes or 100 different of paintings, you're simply beginning to have seen enough, and there is such a thing as too much of a good thing coming in here, and you don't really know where to look anymore because the objects all seem to be competing with each other. Now, we also very often only use one or a few senses. There is still a lot of looking and reading going on. Museums have, of course, tried to address this a lot over the years, but you still come across a lot more looking and viewing than hearing or listening, for example, touching, tasting, smelling. The one sense you seem to use a lot more than the rest is your sight. And that can actually become very exhausting after a certain period of time. We do have a limited attention capacity. There's no way around it. There's only so much we can take in. Even when we are very, very interested in something, we have to allocate time between the different exhibitions and simply start to choose what we want to pay attention to. This is also linked to decision making because we do know that as you become more tired, you also start to get more selective. So you simply start to choose what you want to see the most. And we also see this, for example, in the way museums are structured physically. We know, for example, that if you're entering a museum with lots of floors and you start at the bottom floor and work your way up in the building, we know the top floors are less visited. We also know that visitors who get all the way up there actually spend less time at the top floors. So the way you are structured physically also impacts how visitors experience your exhibitions and your museums. So, and this is definitely worth having a think about as well, because we know that there are certain areas of a museums where visitors simply experience less because they're tired, but also where fewer visitors come. Satiation is a really interesting one because you can have too many of the same objects, and we know that causes a decline in enjoyment and in your satisfaction. So there is simply such a thing as being satisfied in your wishes and in what you wanted to see and what you came here for. There is a limit to how much you can actually experience here. Now, just to have a look at some of the practical tips on how we can avoid museum fatigue. Some of these are well known. For museums, well, provide sitting spaces. Make sure people can actually sit down. Activate multiple senses. This will also help people to concentrate on one sense less and spread out the experiences to accommodate for more senses. Avoid too much repetition. It's very tempting to display all your tens of thousands of books or whatever you have, but if 10 will do and you can still tell your story with fewer objects, fewer texts and so on, definitely go for that. Showcase your highlights or your special offers. If you know there's something that visitors definitely want to see, make sure that they get to see them early on and they know where to find them before they get tired. Also be aware of the different social contexts and social needs of visitors. This will differ depending on who you are, your interest level, the social context in which you visit a museum. We get tired quicker in certain social contexts, and we also simply have to accommodate for the different social needs of a group. If you have children with you, it's maybe not likely that they want to focus on entirely the same things you would have done if you had come alone or in a group of adults, for example. Also be aware of the visitor flow. How long and where exactly do visitors linger? Where is the social space in your museum? If you have a route, is it possible to sometimes turn that route upside down and you walk in from the opposite direction or something? Is it possible to provide visitors with options of shorter routes or longer routes if they have time for that and energy for that? Provide some options and be aware of your visitor flow. This also goes hand in hand with what I said about where fewer visitors come. So if you have a large museum and you know that very few visitors get to the top floors, for example, or down to the bottom floors, or wherever they enter a museum from, have a think about what sort of exhibitions you want to put up in these spaces, and if there's anything you can do to actually direct visitors to these spaces more, and also therefore by doing so spread out visitors more. Now for visitors, go early in the morning and avoid the crowds. This is not always possible if you are dealing with a large national museum. Sometimes you do see huge queues outside a museum even way before they open, but sometimes it is possible to actually go early in the morning or indeed late in the evening or late in the afternoon and avoid some of the crowds that might be there during the middle of the day. Bring water, avoid dehydration. Most museums are actually okay with this, so make sure that you stay hydrated. Wear sensible shoes. Now, I can't tell you the number of times I have seen high heels or something like that at a heritage site with lots of steep staircases or cobblestones or something like that. And even if you are very used to walking in high heels, it's just not a very good idea. You get very tired and your feet and your legs get very tired. Make sure to take breaks, even in the middle of something. Break the flow and sit down and go to the cafe or sit down and reflect or something. So even when you actually feel, oh, I'm in a sort of good run right now, make sure that you don't exhaust yourself and make sure to sit down or just slow down a bit from time to time. That can do it as well. Do a little bit of homework. If you have an idea about what you definitely want to see in this place, if there is a highlight or a specific interest, or an object that you definitely want to see, make sure that you go to that as early on as possible in the visit so you have the energy to see it and take it in. And finally, be realistic about your time. If you only have a couple of hours to visit a museum, there's only so much you can see. Your capacity as well, how long can you stand and walk and look at things, your health, of course, your concentration span, your social context. As I said, are you here with family? Are you here with a study group? Are you here with colleagues? Are you here alone? That will impact as well how you take things in, how your concentration and how you experience things. Do you have some really good examples about museum fatigue, how it might hit you, when it might hit you, any kind of social contexts? Or are there any museums where you felt that they could have done a lot more to address this, or where they actually have done something that was pretty clever to address this? It would be really, really interesting to hear about some of your examples here.